Okay, so now that we have created our very simple explosion effect, let's go ahead and get this guy packaged up as a prefab so that we can instantiate him during gameplay.
Oh, yeah, we got this hyper-realistic kind of explosion. Let's put it to use.
Very nice, Zach. So we'll start out by coming down here to prefab, right-click, create, and we'll create an empty prefab. And we'll call this explosion prefab. And then I'll simply come up here to my explosion particle system, to the game object, drag and drop it down here on explosion prefab. Of course, it's going to turn blue up here. I can simply delete this guy out, no longer need it. So with that done, next thing I want to do is take a look at adding an audio source to this guy. The same way we did to the projectile so that we could play the pew pew sound. Here we want to play the explosion sound. Now we could have added the audio source to the game object while we were working up here before we packaged it all up. It doesn't matter.
Sure.
Okay, just keep that in mind. So on our explosion prefab down here, we want to add an audio source component. So again, we're going to be creating a component. It's going to be an audio component, and it will be an audio source. So if we scroll on down in the inspector to the audio source, again, we have an audio clip, and we've already brought in an explosion sound. So I'll simply left click and drag and drop it over onto the audio clip. This will be a play on awake, and there you go. That's pretty much that simple. So now that we've got this set up, the next thing we need to do is get this guy to instantiate. And in order to get him to instantiate, we know that we're going to need to set up a public field of game object type and then drag and drop this prefab into it so that we have the link there that we can use for instantiation. Well, that's a lot of words. Is it just that it's really late at night and it really wasn't a lot of words?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
Just keep jamming, man.
So what I'm going to do is jump back over here into our projectile script, because it's in the projectile that is aware of this collision.
Right.
So that makes sense as the place that we would instantiate the explosion. So inside the projectile, let's go ahead and come up to the top, and what we're going to do is create a public game object. And this public game object, we can call it something like explosion prefab, like such. And again, if I hit Control S, jump back over into Unity so that it compiles, and then take a look over on the projectile prefab down here, we will find on the script, the projectile script that's been added, explosion prefab. Of course, none at the moment. So this is really cool. If you really look at what we're doing, we're taking a prefab and linking another prefab to it. This is very powerful, and this is the way that Unity has been designed to work. But let me be the first to tell you, when you start working with complex games that have all of these, all of this linkage in place between prefabs and hierarchies of prefabs, and that's when things really start to get sophisticated. And if you do something to accidentally break the linkage, meaning you're working over in your script and one of your fields gets commented out or the data type gets changed or something that causes the linkage back in Unity to get reset so that none is now assigned, and you didn't catch that, and that prefab and that linkage is buried really deep, it can quickly become a mess and a complete pain to troubleshoot. So prefabs are very powerful, but when I work in a more professional sense, of course, this is just an excellent introductory game to get up and running with Unity. I will use prefabs, but as far as linkage and all goes, I try to keep that to a minimum. I try to handle as much as I can through code, the way I bring things in, et cetera, just for the simple fact that when I'm dealing with code only, if I break something in the code and then I go, oh, yeah, I meant to change that back, and I change it back, I don't have to worry about linkage that just got broke back in Unity because I'm now looking at my code and my code's right. But if I forgot that I'd linked something over there, or if somebody else working on my team wasn't in my file and all of a sudden everything broke and they're like, what's going on? And they have to dig and find the linkage.
It allows you to look for your problems in one location instead of many.
It really does simplify things. And I'm just throwing that out there, that this is based off my own experience with Unity, that when you start dealing with complex projects with a lot of linkage going on, this will show its head. I can promise you that. So anyways, so here we are with a prefab, and we're going to take another prefab and link it up there. So now we know that our explosion prefab is the explosion prefab. So now that we've got that set up, we can turn around. Oh, by the way, I know that you guys have been seeing this where we now basically have the random range has been depreciated.
Yeah.
I'm just going to point it out real quick. I'm just going to stick with the random range right now. Again, just following along with what Casey did, but we could simply switch over to random dot range instead. Anyways, jumping back over into Visual Studio. So now that this field right here is populated with data, we can turn around and instantiate this guy. So it comes down to where do we want to instantiate it at? Well, obviously when the collision occurs. Now, let's think about this. When we instantiate something, we need to set the position of it. So in order to set the position, I don't want to instantiate him after I reset the enemy's position, because our explosion would then be instantiated in the scene right above the top of the screen.
Right.
Not good.
The enemy would just disappear, and you might catch a few fringe particles up at the top.
I'm talking about with this crazy explosion, it would suddenly start raining debris from above. So, but you're absolutely right.
If you hit the target.
So, thank you very much. So, what we need to do is, I'm just going to come in here to. It really doesn't matter where we instantiate as long as it's before this guy here. So I'm going to say grab my enemy, and I'm going to put it between these two lines just so that the code will read better. Meaning, if it's above this line right here, I'm going to have to refer to everything in regards to its transform and position as other object. It reads better if I simply say enemy. So between these two lines, after enemy has been defined, I can say instantiate. And we're going to instantiate what? Well, above, we called it the explosion prefab. So we're going to instantiate that. We need to give it a position. And this is what I was just talking about. If this line was above the enemy line above, this one here, then I would have had to have said other object. But instead, I can now simply say enemy. It just reads better. So I can say the enemy's transforms dot position. Okay, and then I can do the quaternion identity, or I could do the enemies, just to keep readability simple for somebody that's new. We could just come in here and say, take his rotation as well.
Right, so it's real easy to see that we're instantiating the explosion prefab, put it at the position and rotation of the enemy.
Precisely.
Booyah.
Yeah, and since we know our enemy doesn't rotate, we could have used the identity if we wanted to quaternion. So all is good there. After we instantiate the explosion, then we have our enemy reset its position and get a new random X and a new random speed, and he begins cruising down once again, and we destroy the projectile that was responsible for this whole thing coming about. So with that, let's go ahead and save, and I'm going to once again do the very cheap way of injecting audio into this video by grabbing my headphones. And oh, this is going to be tricky because I have to actually hit the guy here. So let's
You said it, I didn't say it.
I knew you'd like that. So let's just.
That's awesome.
But not bad, eh? I mean, it's exploding. Yes, just for you.
Very nice.
Very cool, huh?
Yeah.
So we got a little game coming along. But right now, I can cheat all day long. I'm in God mode.
Yeah. If the enemies hit you, nothing happens.
So we do need to address the enemy hitting us. So it's another collision that we need to worry about. But I felt that this was kind of a good time to take a break in the next video and get a new system, so something new to look at. Get a new system in place that's going to work with all of this collision stuff, and that is score and lives.
Okay.
Now, Casey did his a little bit earlier in the project. I figured I'd wait till now. I thought this was a good spot to go ahead and introduce it so that as we are destroying our enemy, our score is climbing up.
Sure.
And then we'll turn around and worry about our player getting destroyed. So that is going to wrap this video up, and we'll see you guys in the next one.